what do you think the issues are right now that are going to swing people in one direction or the other?
I think it's two things. One are policies and whether or not our leaders are able to make a difference on those policies. And it's a challenge, I admit, because these are highly dynamic times. And so making a change in the middle of dynamic times can be challenging. But ultimately, our argument to the voting public is this is an essential time for change, because what we've seen from the incumbent is a failure to deal effectively with our most pressing problems. He's had 3 to 4 years to demonstrate his ability to tackle these, and he hasn't done it. And so we need to actually change course.
What kind of impact do you think Joanne Hardesty will have on this election, considering the average voter looks at it as, if they want her to be police commissioner, you are the person for the job. If they don't, potentially Mayor Wheeler is the person to keep the job. Do you think that Commissioner Hardesty will have an impact on who wins this race?
I think she plays an important role in city politics writ large on council. She looms larger than life in terms of her personality and her influence, especially on policing issues. Again, if this was a referendum on who should be police commissioner, anybody but Ted Wheeler would probably be a better choice at this point. He's completely failed for, just check your watch, what day of protests is it now? I mean, his inability to deal effectively with the protests in the street, which largely have become protests about the public's interaction with the police the night before, demonstrate that he's not really equipped to be the police commissioner. So whether or not people prefer Commissioner Hardesty or me or someone else is going to be a matter of who do you think can do the job. And I actually think that Commissioner Hardesty's proven she's equipped to do that job, because she built a community coalition around that. That's what she got elected on, that policy framework in 2018. She has effectively built a coalition around the ballot measure in November. And so she at least has demonstrated that she has the trust of the public. She can build a coalition to get things done and is going to move forward on policy, which I don't think the incumbent mayor has really demonstrated to the extent that she has.
Well, you've been pretty clear in more or less any time it comes up, any plan or anybody who asks you have a plan, but Commissioner Hardesty seems to be a big part of that, and someone who you want to see as the police commissioner, as part of a team that would change the way policing is done in this city. And I think that she certainly has proven her passion over decades of someone who's been at the forefront of all of these discussions, but she's also met some controversy.
Yeah, these are not times without controversy, frankly. And the difference is the controversy between Commissioner Hardesty and the public are maybe some missteps, that she said the wrong thing, but then she's pretty open about walking it back when she makes a mistake, and learning and moving on. I mean, these are dynamic times. We all have a lot of learning to do. There's a lot of new policy unfolding and innovations that no cities are experts at seeing through, but that we're all having to work hard to really get through to the other side of this. The difference between her and the incumbent, I think, is courage. She's unequivocating in her commitment to racial justice. She sets clear guidelines, and so you have a roadmap with her where you stand. With the incumbent mayor, there's always equivocation. Well, maybe we'll make Hardesty commissioner, maybe we won't, and maybe we have to wait and see. We need people right now who are going to be courageous leaders and say, here's the course we're going to take. Here's how we're going to know whether we're being effective. And if we need to, we'll change course. But we have to set out on a path. Otherwise, we're just going to keep spinning our wheels infinitely, which, again, when my complaints with the incumbent are the same thing keeps happening day after day after day. And we wonder why nothing changes. Well, his behavior doesn't change. And so you can only expect the same results day after day on his watch.
I interviewed the mayor yesterday, and I kind of discussed this Joanne Hardesty conversation with him. And she has been someone who he has repeatedly said that while he sees that she has the credentials for the position, he doesn't think that she's the right fit. And he has mentioned, sparingly, but he has mentioned some of the controversy and some of the comments she has made that could make difficult for her to be in that leadership role. He has also taken a look at some of her plans that she has set forth as, she kind of vies for that position, and said essentially everything that she's proposing, there are things that I have already done or that I am in the process of doing, more or less insinuating that if it doesn't seem as though he wants to give her the job. But when I asked him specifically about that, he made it seem more open-ended, that if he wins and everything gets reshuffled at the beginning of the year, that all of those bureaus are up for grabs and that she has just as good a shot as anybody. Do you think that he is being political there, or do you think that there is a potential that if he did win, she would be given that kind of position?
I mean, of course he's being political there. That's all we get from this person. And so I don't know why we would expect anything different. He's been very dismissive of her. She stepped up and offered to help in the middle of a crisis, which was clearly out of his hands in terms of being able to manage it. And the disregard, I think, for someone of his power and his position to say, I hear you, that you want to step up and take leadership on this role, and I will do what I can to support you in that, would be what he should be doing as mayor, in my opinion, and what I will be doing as Portland's next mayor, which is saying, we're going to tap into your capacity here. We're going to tap into your experience, your knowledge, and your connection to the community. We'll put you in this role, make sure that you're supported fully in that role, that you have the full backing of city council. And then I'm going to use everything that I can do across the other city bureaus to make sure that you're successful there. That's the kind of leadership that we need right now. And it's one reason, again, Wheeler's failure to act like that is why I believe that we're in the situation that we're in. He's admitted it himself. He tries to go it alone. He doesn't tap into his colleagues for help. And then when he fails, 100% of that failure is on him, and he doesn't know what to do with it at that moment.
When Commissioner Hardesty did weigh in on some of the ideas moving forward, especially during the earliest days of the unrest, she did support a few things that I'm wondering where you stood at the time, and I think I would guess, but I don't want to kind of insinuate anything or put words in your mouth, of course. Early on, she did support the use of a curfew, which did not work, but she had supported that idea of implementing a curfew early on after the very first evenings of unrest and some of the rioting that we saw. And also she took a little bit of heat from activists when she put her foot down on the $15 million budget cut as opposed to something larger like a $50 million budget cut. How do you feel working with her despite maybe some of her steps being viewed by the activist community as not big enough?
What we have to think about for the next city council is how we can be more collaborative. We're going to have a lot of new people on council potentially, and what that's going to mean is we're going to have to come up with a new framework of working together. We're not going to agree on everything all the time, but what we don't do is bicker out in public over the issues. I think it's going to be important to get everybody around a table, make sure that we're building consensus on that council and working together to meet our shared goals. We're not going to agree all the time. These are very challenging problems that we're facing. But ultimately, when you put your trust in someone, you have to stay the course and see things through, at least until you have reached a point where you can evaluate progress and then determine whether you need to stay the course or shift. But what we see consistently from the incumbent is it's like trying to govern on quicksand. He equivocates. It's very difficult to pin him down. It's very difficult to have benchmarks. And so I really think that change in leadership is what is needed. And then we can hold that different leadership, whether it's me as Portland's mayor or Commissioner Hardesty, accountable for the demands of the community. The politicking going on around the police budget, because we're in the middle of an election cycle, I think is adding a layer of complexity that, again, on the other side of this election, we'll be able to have a lot more straightforward conversation about what needs to happen and how and when in terms of policing and public safety.
As we discuss some of the other kind of nuances in this political race that might end up contributing to the vote tally, according to the primary, the news coverage, the polls, the media, the ticket, the two candidates vying for mayor are you and the incumbent, Ted Wheeler. But there has been, the most recent poll has a 6% of people writing in Teresa Rayford. If you look at the people who support her, I would say that they are more closely aligned with your political views than they would be Mayor Ted Wheeler's, not to compare you and Teresa apples to apples by any means. But is there a concern that her write-in candidacy, or whatever you want to call it, considering I haven't really seen her up in front of much of anything, could have an impact on your vote tally and have a negative impact on your potential to be mayor?
The big factor here is undecideds. You know, there are people who want different things in a candidate. A representation is one of them. And so whether or not we agree on policy, there are some things that I can never be, and a Black woman is one of them. But what I can offer is progressive policy changes. And really my goal is right now to reach those undecided voters. There's a huge swath of them, and really make the case that I'm the better choice for them over the incumbent. You know, the number of people writing in was actually quite bigger than that 6% just for Ms. Rayford. There were a lot of people, I think, on all ends of the political spectrum who have their own ideas about how they want things to go right now, too. And so there's going to be a lot of moving parts as we go down these next 2 weeks toward Election Day. But ultimately, my team is on the ground. We have a lot of volunteers and staff working for the next 2 weeks, morning till night, on the phones, texting and talking to voters about what matters to them, and making the case that we're the candidate that they should choose of the two on the ballot, which is the easier case to make than trying to educate people that they can even write in another candidate, be it Rayford or another person. I think there are several people writing in at this point.
That's true. We're working on some write-in coverage to do sometime this week, but considering, I guess, Rayford is the front runner of write-in candidates, if there is such a thing, and considering the chances of her winning the election are near impossible, were you surprised, or were you hoping that you would get at least some type of endorsement from her?
What I always hope for is that I can make the case with any individual voter, whether they're a high profile person who can make endorsements or just my next door neighbor, is that they see what I'm offering as the best choice for Portland's future. I've tried to make the case that I'm a progressive, forward-thinking candidate. I've tried to stay away from conversations about right or left and really say, this is about future Portland. It's about green jobs platform. It's about transparency and accountability in government in the upcoming charter review process. It's about creative, urgent solutions to our homelessness crisis. It's about bringing more affordable housing online and my plans for that. And ultimately, you know, week after week, my team has been crafting, along with a wide swath of community advisors, very comprehensive policy plans that the voters can look at and say, hey, here's a candidate who has a clear understanding of the issue, a clear solution that she wants to implement, and she's the right person to bring the people together to get that done. And I'm just going voter by voter to make that case.
Okay. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And thanks again for kind of working with us on getting this signal to work.
Hey, thanks for you working with me, and thanks for covering the mayor's race. 2 more weeks to go.
Does it feel like, so just 2020 has this really weird feeling of it's both monotonous, it's going very slow and very fast all at the same time. It's very strange. How I mean, are these next 2 weeks, do you think they're going to fly by or creep by?
Both, right? You said it.
Yeah.
It reminds me, you have twins at home, right? It reminds me of when you have the babies and they're in that stage where the days feel like they're 48 hours long, and then you blink and they're 2 years old. It's time warps when you're dealing with intense situations like this. So it's one of those time warp moments, I think, where it's both infinite and there's not nearly enough hours in the day to get done what you want to get done.